Welcome back to the final half hour of this special edition of the Gary Sutton Show, live from the Phoenix Park Hotel in Washington, D.C. And we're going to end the show the way we started it yesterday, although we kind of started it a little bit late. We had Michael Harrison, the editor of Talkers Magazine, in. We have Michael Harrison, the editor of Talkers Magazine, at the end, too, and I told him he's the closer.
I know, this is
the
great.
Closer, yeah. I mean, you got to shut it all down. So I'm going to ask you a question.
Well, that's the idea. You're the host.
I know.
I hope you're going to ask me a question.
That's what it is. And, of course, Michael, we have to say it again. His magazine is the Bible of our industry. It's always fun to watch all of us come around and kowtow during the time we're here, and people come up and say, Michael.
Well, I'm very honored by how nice everybody has been to us. Because you don't know until you get out into the field and you talk to people, and everybody has been very, very friendly.
But I always like, nice. The idea, too, that you talk to people about the industry, you talk about what's out there, and you get a macro look that a lot of us don't ever get, and other than to read the various things in Talkers Magazine and on the web. What have you learned? This is like, what have I done on my Christmas vacation? What did you learn getting around? You've done
what have I learned
a lot of interviews.
From being here?
Just being here and getting around and listening to other people and talking to them.
What I've learned is something I've always known, so it's been reaffirmed, and I'm glad to say that even within a narrow part of the spectrum of possibilities in talk radio, every talk show host has a slightly different opinion. There's not this one opinion. All conservatives are not alike. All liberals are not alike. There's so much variety in there, and if you really listen, you can hear it. The perception out there is that everybody's beating the same drum and everybody's saying the same thing, and that is not true. And when you do what I have just done, and I'm in the final stretches myself of 2 days in which I've done about 26 interviews on radio stations and radio shows all across the country, you really get a flavor for what's being said.
I heard a lot of people, and I started this 8 years ago. I've been in every one of these so far, and it's been interesting to hear the really hardcore, where there was almost a single voice a lot 8 years ago. And now you hear people considering other options. You hear people saying other things. Geez, maybe we could do it this way. We're not sure what's out there, but we're willing to consider some new ideas. I've seen that kind of metamorphosis.
Are you specifically talking about the immigration issue?
Immigration issue, but I think there are other issues also out there that we haven't talked about yet during this time, and obviously this has been the main focus. But as you look at it, people, there are people saying, there's other things.
Well, what happens is...
It's not so polar.
What happens is, and this is true of popular culture, and believe it or not, even the immigration issue is popular culture. We're talking about pop culture, verbal pop culture, what people are thinking. Politics has become pop culture. Just watch the State of the Union and you see the president signing autographs. I mean, the president signs autographs at the State of the Union? Talk about pop culture? Okay, so, and that has nothing to do with whether he's a Democrat or a Republican. It could happen with either side. This is where we're at today. Popular culture changes with mood swings in the nation. That amorphous, hard to measure, hard to define, hard to take a picture of public mood, public opinion changes. And when public opinion changes, all those sandcastles that we build thinking this is the way people feel and this is what I stand for and this is my ideal, blah, 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 it just comes washing away. You're just left, you're in the parade and all of a sudden, the parade just turned right and I turned left, and I don't mean left, right. I'm just saying one direction or another, and you're left by yourself. And that's what happens. And so many people in talk radio, in politics, in the arts, in all walks of life, they tend to think that the way public opinion is right now is the way it'll always be, and they're always shocked when suddenly the world changes right under their feet, and they suddenly don't know where'd everybody go. And that's what's happening now, and it has always happened.
And I think when you're in talk radio, especially, maybe there are other walks of life, I'm sure, as well, the one thing that's constant is there's going to be change. As the moods change, different people will come onto the scene, different ideas will come onto the scene. One of the things that we talked about last night, and I thought we had dinner with Michael last night, so I can say this on the air, that one of the things that you made a great point about was we need more audiences. We need audiences that maybe aren't even as popular to some people out there, but you shouldn't. Maybe the best way to paraphrase would be you shouldn't be afraid to hear another point of view. You shouldn't be afraid to talk about things that maybe have been uncomfortable. You shouldn't be afraid to put that out there, because that does widen your audience in the long run.
It also strengthens your position, because if you're the only, if talk radio is only doing one political point of view, then it's understandable why other political points of view would want to shut it down. They have no stake in its existence. It's a threat to them. They see it as an organized utilization of the media to do what they don't like. Whether you agree with their liking it or not is irrelevant. They don't like it. But if they have their point of view in that institution as well, they'll be less likely to want to shut you down. They'll be less likely to boycott you. They won't have a leg to stand on to boycott you. Because, when you go to a sponsor and you say, don't advertise with this, blah, 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 it's so terrible, but the sponsor sees that the other points of view are out there too, it becomes less dangerous to them, and it makes it more likely that it will continue to exist.
What's interesting to me is I get some emails and I get some people who say, I can't stand your point of view. I couldn't stand your point of view yesterday on this particular subject. I didn't like it today on this subject. And I want to write and give them a varsity letter and say, thank you for listening every day. I'm honored that you listen. It does tell me something positive, that someone wants to hear me enough to be able to make their own mind up about something, whether it's something that I would agree with or not. And I think that's kind of a healthy thing in a way. So they may not always say it. They may not always say it in a way that I think is very healthy, but they do at least say, I'm listening and I'm thinking.
Well, getting anybody's attention in today's world is very difficult.
Yeah.
Even though there's more opportunity to go out there in the media with the internet, it's very difficult to get anybody's attention, even for a moment, let alone for a long period. So that one thing is great. To have people agree with you or not agree with you and still have your attention, that means you're interesting and you're thought-provoking and that they're thinking. Just to get anybody to think, there's so much mindlessness going on in today's society. So I hear what you're saying, and I think that you get your head on straight, Gary.
We're talking with Michael Harrison, editor of Talkers Magazine, well read throughout the country, and he's the guy that comes up with the 100 best talk shows in the country.
Well, I'm responsible for it.
You are responsible.
Talkers Magazine is not a one-man operation, so you give me a lot of credit. I have a very, very fine group of people that.
Should I say you're the motivating force?
I'm the director.
Yeah,
I'm the director. I'm the director. I'm the conductor of a symphony. I'm the director of a movie. But I'm the coach of a team. But it's a team. I could not be sitting here like this doing this with you. There are people right now writing news, covering news. We're publishing all day long, so it would be unfair for it to seem that I come up with this.
You, amidst all the jobs and wonderful things you are doing in your life and have done in your life, we were talking last night, you said talk show host was one of the most fun things you did for 10 years. You were in Los Angeles.
I have been a talk show host among many things in my life. In L.A., I did a talk show for 10 years. It was called Harrison's Mic, and it was on a rock station, KMET. And I did other things at that time as well. It wasn't my full-time job. It was a
Saturday, Sunday gig,
It was a Saturday morning and Sunday night.
Right.
We started the weekend with it. We ended the weekend with it. And it was on a rock station, and it was years ago. So it wasn't today's rock audience. It was our generation when they were younger. And it was still called, young adults. And I talked issues on a rock station, and it had a tremendous audience. It was the number one show in its time slot of all shows in Los Angeles, and it had tremendous influence. And I talked issues. It wasn't left-right politics, because in those days we didn't do that.
Yeah.
It was more of a personal sociological view of things. And it was, looking back, you asked me what was the most fun thing I've ever done. That's a hard question to answer.
I'm not saying of all the things you've ever done.
Right, but that was
radio.
That certainly was one of the most enjoyable, and I never realized how special it was while I was doing it. It was something I did.
I'm always interested as a talk show host, fellow talk show host, in how you deal with people who agree, people who disagree, people who genuinely have an opinion, and then you also know there are people who genuinely are carrying someone else's opinion in with them and reciting it. So
it's called being nuanced.
Yes.
The answer to your question is nuance. Talk to more than one person at the same time. Learn to talk to the listener who calls and to the person who's listening, and send two messages. For example, when I do a show or did a show, I'd say, oh, so that's what you think. Very interesting. The listener now knows I don't buy it. the caller thinks I'm finding it interesting.
Yes.
I'll say, wow, you've come to that conclusion. How complicated a subject. Sounds like you just read a pamphlet, which I was telling you about. And so, okay. All right. Yeah, I read a pamphlet. They have no idea what that means.
Right.
And meanwhile, the smarter people listening know that you're humoring them or whatever. There's many different levels that you can communicate on. Really, black belt talk show hosts do that. There aren't that many black belt talk show hosts in the business. There are a lot of wannabes and a lot of people who think that they're there to save the world, and they learn the talking points, and they don't originate the talking point, and they don't have a new angle on the talking point. They just know the talking points. Well, that's like somebody playing the same record over and over and reading a liner note. Those were the Doobie Brothers. It's like, come on.
Well, it's interesting to me that a lot of people that come in many times look at things, and I was an old history teacher, as you know, and they look at things as, okay, history started when I was born and when I die.
That's a problem with today.
It really is a big problem with today. And then also trying to insert yourself into history and say, well, this is the way it should have been. Well, they didn't know you back then when they were doing whatever they were doing.
Right.
And so I find that to be an interesting thing that talk show hosts have to deal with now, the revisionist kind of thought, not just on history, but on so many other things as well.
Yeah, well, yes. You dealt with two things there. And I think a knowledge of history is very important for future growth. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one of the biggest problems in popular culture today is there seems to be a complete disregard for history.
Right.
Almost as if it'll be interpreted that you're a Luddite or that you're stuck in the past.
Exactly.
And yet, all art forms, all schools of thought are built upon the shoulders of the people that came before. Or it's not a school, it's not a genre, you're just some guy out there by yourself. And things don't happen in a vacuum. We're a social creature, us Homo sapiens. So I think that anybody who says to me, that was before my time, as a reason for not knowing who Abraham Lincoln was, it's like, hey, it's before your time.
History.
As a history teacher, that has to drive you crazy when you talk to young people and they go, oh, yeah, that was before my time. You're not too bright.
We like to, every now and then, I throw a question out there. We'll tell you, who's the best president ever? And I said, there's really only one that you can actually say. And then, say what? And I'll do that to kind of engender a little bit of discussion. I'll say George Washington. Guy started everything. I said, think about that. He set all the rules. I said, now. And then we'll get into an argument about there's a lot of other possibilities, which there are. But, it's interesting when you get into that discussion, you now have narrowed your audience because there are a lot of people that don't want to play in that because they come in not quite sure that they can play in that game. That's something that you worry about, too, as a talk show host, that, are you weeding your audience out too much? Are you making your audience come to another level? My thought is that we need to make them come to another level, and yet at the same time also realize we may engender a lot more listeners than we are participators, although we know that probably less than 1% of the people who listen actually ever come in and call in a talk show.
Yeah, but the art is bring them up to a higher level, but don't make it boring.
Exactly.
Make it interesting.
Like this segment right here.
Well, I don't know. I don't know how this is coming across, but I think this is probably the best conversation you've had in the last 2 days.
Probably
ever.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know what you had yesterday, because yesterday was before my time.
Yeah.
I was just born this morning.
Yeah, me too.
But it's very
and it
funny.
will end when we die, by the way.
I don't always, as a person on the radio, I don't always know whether what I did was any good. I've done shows on the radio where I thought it was horrible, then I listen back and go, wow, that was good, or vice versa. When you think you did a good job, you realize you didn't.
Just got a tweet from a golf pro. And he said, good show today, Gary. He said, definitely not before my time. So he's a guy that still believes in history. This guy's pretty sharp. He went to the University of Houston and played golf. But so we have a golfer listening today there, too. But yeah.
Is that what he majored in the University of Houston?
I don't know, but he's pretty good.
Oh, okay.
And he's in fact, he's real good. He was my teacher for a while. And this is the first tweet I've ever gotten from him on the show.
We motivated him now to get into social media.
So we now know it's the best segment ever.
I hope he likes me.
Michael Harris.
Like me.
Michael Harrison, the editor of Talkers Magazine, here on the Gary Sutton Show as we close out our time here in Washington, D.C.
Follow me on Twitter.
Yeah, we do all that.
I listen to some shows, that's all they say at the beginning. Follow me, like me.
Or like this, at Gary G. Sutton, or go to gary.sutton@cumulus.com, or you can go on our website at newsradio910.com.
It becomes a blur.
Yeah, thank you. But by the way, you can also catch our segments this morning at facebook.com/910WSBA. Not that I would use any of that ever. Mm-hmm. Michael Harris, an important here this morning. We've become a little irreverent, I guess, the last day or so, just in our conversations and so forth. You had a traumatic experience while you've been here, right?
Yeah, somebody walked in on me in my room.
In your room?
But nothing was going on. I was sitting there doing email.
You did an entire thing last night. This was like an hour of this, and we ended up going to dinner and stretching out even more. Someone opened up his doors. They gave him the wrong key.
They gave him the wrong key, and the door wasn't locked. And I was just sitting there. I had just arrived 15 minutes before,
right.
And unfortunately, I hadn't yet begun my ballet exercises or whatever it is that I wouldn't want somebody walking in on me in a hotel room. I'm sitting there working. And this guy he walks in, and I look at him. He says, "You're in my room." I said, "No, you're in my room." And he was stunned. And I said, "Sorry, it's taken." He says, "I'm awfully sorry." I said, "It's okay." And that was it. That was the whole thing.
So last night we're sitting out in the lobby, and this guy shows up to apologize again.
Yeah.
We're going to come back right after this. We'll tell you the rest of this story.
And we'll show you pictures.
And we'll show you pictures, yes. Jeez, here, pictures of the mind. Here on the Gary Sutton Show. We'll be right back at the Phoenix Park Hotel in Washington, D.C. for our final 5 minutes of the show here on News Radio 910 WSBA. Welcome back to the Gary Sutton Show, our final 5 minutes, and I can't think of anybody I'd sooner spend it with here than Michael Harrison, editor of Talkers Magazine. And we were talking about your almost traumatic experience the other night. We have about 5 minutes left here, and I want to get a final word for you that's going to spread out around America, and people are going to be settled because of it. But, somebody opened your door the other night with the wrong key, and then he came back to apologize last night.
I didn't have my machine gun.
You took him for about an hour.
An intruder.
With What If. It was one of those brilliant pieces I've ever seen.
What if I were naked? What if, he had his wife with him who didn't walk in the door.
Who we never have seen yet, by the way.
I know, that's a whole other story.
Yeah.
What if... Well, your listeners can think of the what ifs.
Yeah.
I was all by myself in my room.
Yeah.
And not one what if happened.
Yeah.
What if you walked in on somebody in his hotel room and nothing happened?
There it is.
That's what what if I were sleeping and woke up? What if I were in the bathroom taking a shower with headphones on? He and his wife got into bed, and then I joined them.
This was like having a show in front of you last night, and we're all kind of sitting there, and you'd leave it for a second, and then, like a great comedian, you come back to it again and say, and what if? And this poor guy is standing there about ready to move on to something else, and he was just...
He was freaked out.
It was pretty...
He was so freaked out by the whole thing.
And he's a great guy, by the way.
Yeah, yeah.
Really fun guy.
And he was amazed that I wasn't upset. That was the thing. He said, I couldn't believe you weren't upset. I said to him, it's all right, don't worry about it. Okay, nothing happened, no harm. But he expected, this is the end of the world.
Exactly. And especially he did it to you.
To me, of course. I'm so important.
You'll be in the worst 100 talk show host. Anyway. Hey, final thoughts on this whole thing we call life. We were talking so much the last couple of days about so many things, and talk radio, how we should look at things, what the best kinds of shows are, what the worst kinds of shows are. Just a final thought from you on anything you want to say.
I think that if you want to do anything in this world today with the internet and all the noise, you'd better have a purpose. You better know who you're talking to, and you better give them something they want. And don't be so concerned with everybody knowing about me and everybody liking me. And don't worry so much about being liked. Worry about being likable. That's the best advice I can give. Do something that's worthy of attention. Yeah. Don't seek the attention before you put the thought into what you're doing to get it. And right now we're in an era where everybody is more concerned about being liked and getting attention and being out there than in their brand than knowing what their brand represents. And that's my advice. My advice is go back to doing something of substance. Otherwise, you're just making a lot of noise.
And try to make it something that is going to be interesting in the long run, something that is going to keep the other person involved in the conversation. Mm-hmm. If there's a debate, in the debate. If there's something else out there.
The other thing that I would say is seek truth, not victory.
I like that.
Seek truth. Don't try to get victory at the expense of truth. Right. And we also are doing that a lot these days.
Well, we try to seek truth, and at least from this corner of the world. But, I don't know if we always find it, but to seek it, to be in the process of seeking it.
You'll never find it as an empirical singular entity.
Sure.
But the seeking of it, the spirit that comes with seeking truth, and being not afraid to turn around and go, well, that wasn't it. Oh, I'm wrong. I'm changing my mind in the face of new facts. I think that's a healthy attitude. That's a truth-seeking attitude.
And how about if we end with a very nice quote today that comes from Bill Cosby when he said, the past is a ghost, the future a dream. All we ever have is now. So I'm enjoying the now with you, and thank you so much for spending the time with us, Michael.
Now was before my time.
Now was just a moment ago. It just went past. Michael Harrison, editor of Talkers Magazine, with us here on the Gary Sutton Show. Always delightful. We've had a great time here being with you. I'll be back in the studios tomorrow. We're going to be checking in with Clark Hodges of Hodges Capital, and we'll also be checking in with Dr. Nick Pandelides, who blogs under Dr. Wright, and we'll find out some things tomorrow, a little bit more about healthcare. Thank you for being with us here the last 2 days. It has been a joy, and thank you. We'll look forward to talking to you tomorrow here on the Gary Sutton Show. It's high noon.